All right, welcome to Psalms class. We are in the middle of Psalm 3, where we ended at the last part of last class. So let's pick up. We only have a few sermons here in these boxes beside the Psalm to cover. So let me go through these with you, and then you can take screenshots or copy this, whichever one, however you want to record this information. Notice that David is a type of Christ first. Jesus in Gethsemane is similar to David in his straits in Psalm 3, which probably was when he was facing the coup by Absalom in 2 Samuel 18. So see these parallels. I think this is beyond coincidence that you have all this parallel. Notice that there was a rebellion against David in this psalm. And there was a rebellion against Jesus. The Pharisees and his enemies had worked together in apprehending him, arresting him, condemning him, and all that's on his mind as he's praying in Gethsemane. Number 2, David said, "Arise, let us flee." 2 Samuel 15:14. Jesus said, "Arise, let us go thence." John 14:31. David passed over the brook Kidron, 2 Samuel 15:23. Jesus passed over the brook Kidron, John 18:1. I believe it's Barclay's commentary that talks about the Kidron running red with blood during Passover week. And that was Passover week, of course, when they crossed over. And so all that blood that had been shed for more than 1,000 years, 1,500 years, had been typical of that one Lamb of God that would die on the cross. And that he could have paused and thought about that as he crossed over all those lambs that were dying, would be dying that weekend, that represented his death in type. Then we see in the last place, David said, let him do to me as seemeth good to him, 2 Samuel 15:26. And then Jesus said, "Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." King James, Matthew 26:39. Welcome, Michael. Good to see you. We just covered our first sermon, David as a type of Christ in Gethsemane, and we have 4 points that are parallel between those two events. Now let's move into when you have trouble falling asleep, because this psalm is about sleep. Notice in verse 5, "I laid me down and slept, I awake, for the Lord sustained me." So he laid down and was able to sleep even under those difficult circumstances that we just touched on there. And sometimes everybody, I guess, has trouble sleeping. So what can I do to relieve the agitation in my mind when I'm have something that's bothering me, something that's keeping me from sleep, and I need to sleep because I'm going to preach tomorrow, or I have an early appointment, or I need to be fresh for my day? How can I help myself get to sleep? Well, there are 2 different approaches here. So I'm going to do one that focuses on the spiritual aspect of it, and then number 2 that focuses on the physical aspect of it. So let's look at when you have trouble falling asleep. Number 1, monitor your thought intake. And you've got Psalm 3:1-3 where we are, Psalm 46:10, Philippians 4:8. We are to think on these things. So our thoughts have an impact in our bodies, and then our bodies cannot relax or can relax depending on what our thought processes are. So monitor your thought intake. It might not be best to watch the evening news and then try to go to sleep with all the bad news that is reported. It might be better to read from one of the Psalms, or it might be better to take in something else rather than something that's going to take my thoughts in a direction that's troubling. Number 2, when you have trouble falling asleep, meditate on God's character. You can meditate on the love of God, the grace of God, the long suffering of God, the power of God. And so meditating on those eternal realities about God can ease the mind. Number 3, review God's promises. God has promised to take care of me. He's promised that I'm in his hand. And I listed several promises over here in this side box. Psalm 23:6, 42:5, Isaiah 25:9, John 10:29, Romans 8:37-39, 1 Peter 3:13, 1 John 4:4, Jude 1:24-25. So we might do well to have a Bible on our nightstand beside our bed, or pull it up on our phone and read some of the promises and meditate on those when we're trying to go to sleep. Number 4, talk to the shepherd. What about prayer? That's verse 4 in our chapter, but also 23:1-6, the good shepherd, the shepherd's psalm, Psalm 37:5, Psalm 55:22, 1 Peter 5:7, casting your care upon him, for he careth for you. Number 5, avoid sin. A guilty conscience can make it hard to sleep. Paul said that he had always tried to keep a good conscience. That's a good practice. If I want good sleep, I should have a good conscience. And then number 6, trust God's protection. I might be in a difficult circumstance. I might be in a place where there are dangers that are around me, but God is around me too, and God will protect me. You've got 3 verse 5 in our psalm, then 23:2, 121:4-7, Job 11:18-19, Ezekiel 34:15. Trust God's protection. Then number 7, remember previous assistance. 3, 5, and 7. Has God gotten me safely to this night, to this opportunity to sleep? Well, yes, I've been protected, and I've lived all these nights that I was concerned. So I can remember the previous assistance, and that will give me some confidence for God protecting me and helping me tonight. So that's a sermon on the spiritual aspect of learning to sleep well. But what about some practical suggestions, some physical aspects of getting better sleep? And there are just 4 of these, but number 1, avoid calories and caffeine late in the day. Now, some people that doesn't bother, and they can drink, a gallon of coffee and go straight to bed and go to sleep. That's good for them. But others may find that if they have caffeine or eat a late snack, that revs up their engine before they're trying to shut it down. So just know your body and use good judgment about calories and caffeine. Number 2, exercise during the day. Sometimes many of us, I suppose, are not as active as we should be, and that may especially be true of preachers that are busy studying, and we have a lot of responsibilities that require us to sit in front of a computer or in an office. But we should make some time to get some exercise. Set a goal for a number of steps for your day. 6,000 steps, 10,000 steps, some number, and then work toward that. And a body that's exercised will sleep better than one that's not. It also relieves stress to exercise. Number 3, do not sleep too much. I've talked to 1 or 2 older people through the years, and they say, I have so much trouble falling asleep. But then you get to talking to them, and they're drifting off to sleep in their easy chair all throughout the day. They're watching TV, and then they're taking a nap, and then they're reading and fall asleep. And it's hard to sleep if you're already slept for 3 hours during the day. It's hard to get back to sleep at night. So if you're having trouble sleeping, you might want to not sleep too much the night before or during the day. Number 4, enjoy something humorous. I enjoy reading whenever I'm having trouble sleeping, getting my mind where it needs to be. I enjoy reading something funny. I've read Tom Holland's books on, not his sermon books, although I've used those, but his books about funny things that happened to him growing up. And I enjoy Calvin and Hobbes comics. And you may have some things that you enjoy that can put you in a good mindset getting ready to go to sleep. All right, the next thing that we'll notice here is the Lord gives sleep. So here are some additional promises that relate directly to sleep. And I'm not going to read those to you, but you can take a picture of those. And if you're working up a sermon or sermons on this subject, which I'm sure many people would appreciate, then you would want to work those verses into that sermon, your introduction or somewhere. Some of these will fit over here with these other points that we've made. All right, let's talk about next, who can cry unto the Lord? Because this verse says that David had cried unto the Lord. Verse 4, I cried unto the Lord with my voice. Who can cry to the Lord and expect the Lord to listen? Well, you have a number of verses that talk about those who cried to the Lord or were invited to cry to the Lord. The poor man can cry to the Lord, Psalm 34:6. The troubled man, Psalm 50:15, Psalm 116, 1-4. The righteous man can call upon the Lord, Psalm 66:17-19, Matthew 7:7. The persistent man can cry, Psalm 86, 3-4. Just because God didn't answer my prayer yesterday doesn't mean that I can't pray about the same thing today. God wants me to be persistent in my prayers. What about the depressed man? Yes, he can pray, Psalm 131-2. What about the man who is needy? Yes, Psalm 138:3, Isaiah 65:24. What about a man who has a complaint? Yes, Psalm 142, 1-3. And what about the afflicted man? Yes, James 5:13 says that if he is afflicted, let him call upon the Lord, let him pray. And then our last sermon from Psalm 3 is a list of divinely delivered servants of God. And this talks about the Lord had delivered him, had protected him. Verse 5, sustained me. I will not be afraid. Verse 6, O Lord, save me. The Lord hast smitten. So he had been delivered. Salvation belongeth to the Lord. So that runs through that whole context. So David had been delivered. That's right here in our context. Verse 7. But Noah was delivered of God. Genesis 6-9. Joseph, Genesis 37-39. Even though he was afflicted and persecuted, God protected him, and he ultimately exalted him. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were delivered in the fiery furnace of Daniel 3. Daniel was delivered in the lion's den, Daniel 6, 1-22. Paul was delivered, 2 Timothy 4, 16-18. And Christians are promised to be delivered, Romans 8, 35-39. So several good sermons, I think, out of Psalm 3 that would be easy to preach, either directly connected to the text or using it as a beginning point for other scriptures that are similar, have similar ideas in them. All right, anybody miss anything there that you want me to back up, you want to get?
Stay right there. Let me get a screenshot. Go down. There
You want
go.
the whole thing or pieces?
Go down a little bit more.
All right, how about that? Too much? Not enough right there?
Perfect. Thank you.
You cut off the last part of divinely delivered. Do you want to get
No,
that?
I already got that.
Got that one. All right. Let's move into Psalm 4 then, if everybody's good with that. And I'm going to switch screens on you and do the background first. So first thing we'll notice is that Psalm 3 and Psalm 4 are twins. Psalm 3 and Psalm 4 are twins. Someone's trying to join our Zoom, so I'm going to take time to give the passcode to that, see if she can get in. All right, twins, just like 1 and 2 are twins. Now 3 and 4 are twins. Likely the same time as Psalm 3, and perhaps the rebellion of Absalom, 2 Samuel 18. Really, that's 15, also 15 beginning, I think. 15 through 18. All right, let's look at the keys to the chapter. The title is Hear Me When I Call. Hear Me When I Call. Based on verse 1 and verse 3. The key verse is 4:4, where he says, stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. That's the key verse of Psalm 4. And then the key thought, based on the VBS song, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. And that's verse 7. Talks about the joy that he had in serving God. A very simple outline. There are 3 sections to Psalm 4. That's 1 to 3 is hear me. 4 to 6 is fear me. 7 and 8 is cheer me. So hear me 1 to 3, fear me 4 to 6, cheer me 7 and 8. So we have an inscription here that uses the word Neginoth. And if you made notes in our introduction, then you could go back and see that this is a word that was included in our list. But what it means is stringed instruments, stringed instruments. Of course, in the Old Testament, there were mechanical or stringed and wind instruments used, not authorized in the New Testament. All right, now we want to look at an overview of the psalm. What I find interesting here, two things. First is the personal aspect of it. So I went through and marked all the personal pronouns, and there are 13 in 8 verses. So you can do that if you want to also. You don't need me to show you where they are. You can do it, but I'll put it on the screen there if you just want to sort of get the point. So verse 1 uses personal pronouns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the first verse. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. So this is a very personal psalm. The second thing that I find interesting is the connection between verse 3 and the previous psalm in verse 2. So you notice in verse 2 of Psalm 3, it says, many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. There is no help for him in God. So God's not going to help you. You're on your own. But then notice down in verse 3 of Psalm 4, the Lord will hear me when I call. So yes, God is there. Yes, God is listening. Yes, God will help. So you have in those twin Psalms that idea, one presents the problem and the next one answers it. The third thing that I'll notice on this screen is down in verse 8. He said, I will lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. So he's sure that he'll be kept safe during the night. If this is when David was run out of his palace by Absalom, you know that he had to sleep out away from the city, and he lodged away from his counselor said he won't be dumb enough to stay with all the group. He'll find a hidden place to sleep. Well, that was a treacherous time for him. But here's the point. He could not stop the war around him, but he could stop the war within him. Because the war within him was answered by faith. But the war around him, that was not something that he would be able to stop. All right.
That right there is a sermon that needs to be preached from every pulpit. Every pulpit with what we got going on in our world right now.
You're exactly right. With all this, election year and wars and just so many things that are causing people to be upset. We can't impact that except with our prayers, but we can be at peace in the midst of the storm. And that's what God wants us to do, to trust in him. All right, I think that's all the background that I wanted to give you. Now I want to go and give you some sermons and some explanation from from Psalm 4. We have a good bit in this psalm like we did previously. So I think what I'll do is go through first the notes, and then we will go through, well, I'll tell you what, let me just go verse by verse, and I'll just cover it as we go, because I think that probably will end up being the best, because I haven't even marked all these. I was adding some things this morning from the handouts that I sent you. I guess Dave may have put those in your LMS, so you could check that for the handouts. But I added some additional notes from that this morning. So verse 1, hear me when I call. That's a good sermon title. Hear me when I call. And there's a
No, I
song.
wasn't coming to class today. I don't want to go down the stage.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Keep talking.
You might have to mute yourself, Mike.
Yeah, I'm talking.
All right, no problem. Hear me when I call, O God, my righteousness, thou hast enlarged me. When I was in distress, have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. So I look for that word enlarged in other contexts. I think that's an interesting word. You don't see a lot in the scriptures, but you can make a sermon out of God enlarged the borders of Israel, Exodus 34:24, Deuteronomy 12:20, and he connected that to their righteousness. So if they were wicked, he said, I'm going to trim your blessings. I'm going to cut you back. But if you will be righteous, if you'll be faithful, then I will enlarge your borders. So what about us? The same principle would be true. Number 2, an enlarged mouth, 1 Samuel 2:1. I don't know the context immediately in there in 1 Samuel 2, but I will make the application here that God can give us an opportunity to speak for him. He can enlarge our hearing if we will pray to him, because what we're doing is reaching people for him. So enlarged mouth. Number 3, enlarged feet. And there are your verses for that. And then enlarged heart. And that is the most important one, because that one will lead to other blessings. And you have a number of verses there. Psalm 25:17, 119, 32, 2 Corinthians 2:4, 6:11. 12:25, Ephesians 6:8. While you're jotting those down, I'll give you just a second.
I'm trying to find the verse because that enlarged mouth,
Yeah.
I know it's in Acts, but where God tells Paul that he can speak freely.
Yeah, that would be a good verse to tie in with that. So if you find that verse, I'll write it here on my, fill it in.
The context of the 1 Samuel 2:1 is Hannah is praying. And hold on a second. Well,
Yeah, Hannah's prayer is answered.
yeah, okay. That my heart exalts in the Lord, my horn is exalted, my mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation.
Right.
So she speaks up against
Yeah.
those that don't trust in God.
Right. She's speaking up against despair because God has answered her call by having a child. She's speaking of prophesying of despair and hope that we ought to have in God. And she goes down that litany and list that God will even raise us up from the dunghill and set us among his prince, and we'll be cleaned off. That's how far sometimes people take despair. So that's a pretty powerful scripture.
Yes, it is. All right. Let's move on to verse 2. I'll come back to the lessons momentarily, so I won't cover that other point. But let's look at verse 2. O ye sons of men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after leasing. So leasing is lying. So they're seeking lies. Vanity is often associated with idolatry in scripture, sometimes associated with self, the vanity, the pride of vanity, as it is in Ecclesiastes. There, let me give you the first 3 lessons from the chapter. So I'm going to back up momentarily here. We have been and will continue to do lessons from each psalm, just a way to preach straight through the psalm. And then we will have additional sermons that don't tie into that sermon. So it's color coded with different color codes. But number 1, lesson from Psalm 4 is in verse 1. God enlarges the person to meet the challenge. God enlarges the person to meet the challenge. You may feel overwhelmed at something you're responsible for, but God will give you what you need to be the husband or the preacher or the person or whatever it is that you need to be able to accomplish. If God wants you to accomplish it, he can enlarge you in your distress. In verse 2, we see our second lesson. Lord, teach us not to be ashamed of glorious things, nor glory in shameful things. A lot of people have it backwards, They're proud of their sins, but they're ashamed. They would be ashamed if somebody thought they were a Christian, or knew that they went to church services, or that they were, sincere, honest businessman or whatever. Well, Lord, teach us not to be ashamed of glorious things, nor glory in shameful things. And that's what you have contemplated there in verse 2. The third lesson is the last part. Never love lies. Never love lies. Love truth. Love truth. Now, let me give you a sermon called Blessings in the Midst of Trials. Right
To
here.
get into that.
What's that?
I'm not quite caught up. Am I the only one? If I'm the only one, then please
I'm sorry. I
continue.
didn't understand what you were saying, Michael. My bad. I was trying to think ahead at the same time. I can't do that. So I'll give you another minute. There you go.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
that passage is Acts 18:9-10.
Good. Thank you.
He says, and the Lord said to Paul in the night by a vision, do not be afraid.
That was when he was at Corinth, wasn't it?
I believe so.
That's when he was at Corinth and he was ready to get out there.
Yeah, I was in Corinth this year. It's a scary place still.
Really?
Yeah, Athens, Corinth. Although I really enjoy going there. And the ancient, they've excavated a good bit of the ancient part of the city. And there's actually the bema, the judgment seat that Paul likely stood. I stood right where Paul stood, most likely, because you still have the original bema. And then below it, there's a whipping post right there. And then the place where the prisoner would be brought and stand before the judge. That was really fascinating. So many interesting things still over there to be able to fortify our faith and see, it just helps to be able to picture what it was like in those days.
I'm good. I got it now.
Okay, let's move over then to this box. I don't think this is original with me. The reason I know that is because it's alliterated. So I think I got this somewhere else probably, but I didn't credit it. But if you know, I'll add it into my notes. Number 1, blessings in the midst of trials, enlargement. We talked about that. Then verse 2, encouragement. Verses 2 and 3. Then verses 4 and 5, enablement. God enables us. And then 6 through 8, enlightenment. He helps us to understand. So blessings in the midst of trials, enlargement, encouragement, enablement, enlightenment. Those are 4 very valuable blessings to receive when we really need them in the time of our trial. Now, under that box, the next box is really just an application for that point that we made about glorying and shame moment ago. But here's how you might apply that. Here are some examples. Number one, I really told her off. Well, that's just glorying in your shame or bragging about sexual conquest, locker room talk. Or I got the better of him by pulling the wool over his eyes in that deal. Or I cheated on my taxes and got away with it for 15 years. Or you won't like me when I'm mad. Well, those are all examples of glorying in shameful practices. We ought not do that. And I think that helps people understand, you can say don't glory in your shame and it may go right over their head. But you start talking about these things and people are going to sit up and say, oh, that's me or that's somebody I know, so they can relate to it. All right, anybody need more time on those three boxes? All right, back into verse 3. But know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. So we have another point to add to our lessons from Psalm 4. God sets the godly apart for himself. We are the ones that he wants to be with. He will collect the godly. Now, once you write that, there are a number of scriptures there if you want to add any of those that go with that point. But there's another sermon that I'll give you that's based on this text. There are 3 levels of interaction with God. 3 levels of interaction with God. So number 1, congregational. That's back in chapter 2, verse 12, which I'll look at, which says, blessed are all they that put their trust in him. So that's congregational there. But then in our verse 3, the second one is individual. The Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. So that's individual. That's one person. And then the third is personal. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Now, obviously, the him and the I are both singular. But you make a different point. You don't have to be in a congregation of righteous people to be righteous. God will accept you even if you don't have others to support you or who are faithful to God. And then we see the personal aspect of it. God will accept us on a personal level, in our personal residence, in our personal closet, in our personal thoughts. So 3 levels of interaction with God.
So, Brother Webster, that point is profound. When many Christians stand and they feel like they're standing by themselves, they're really not. We are always in the majority when God is on our side.
You can never be alone because he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you.
That's right.
How could you ever be alone? When he never leaves you. But sometimes we do feel alone, but that's because of our faith being weak and not because of reality, because he will be with us. Let's move into verse 4. Stand in awe and sin not. This is our key verse. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still.
I got a quick interjection here.
Okay.
Mine translates it be angry and do not sin.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
Mine says tremble.
Mine says, yeah, tremble.
Well, it's pretty easy to see what's happening there. This word can be translated, it's an emotional word. So what's the emotion? Is it anger? Is it awe? Is it reverence? So all those things would fit. I haven't done the background study to see which, why the King James went one way and some more modern translations went the other. But I think if I were preaching this, I probably would just acknowledge that and preach both points, because you can support both points from other scriptures. So you know that they're scriptural, You think about the New Testament, Jesus looked around about on them in anger, Mark 3:5, but he never sinned. So you can be angry without sinning. And then what is it, Ephesians 4:26? Be angry and sin not. That's almost
Yep.
verbatim what this is saying. So you could put that that reference here beside it. But what I want to do is give you another sermon based on verses 4 and 5, called How to Develop a Spiritual Life. How to develop a spiritual life. I love how-to sermons because I think people can relate to them and benefit from them when you really spell out how to. So how to develop a spiritual life. Everybody needs a spiritual life, but maybe you're someone who didn't grow up in the church, doesn't have Christian parents, and they're new to Christianity. They're like, I've never thought like this before. I don't have any examples to follow. Tell me, how do I develop a spiritual life? Well, here's a verse that can help. So number one, you need an awareness of God. Stand in awe. So be aware of God. Think about God all day. We're going to see when we get to chapter 10 that the wicked do not have God in all his thoughts, which implies that the righteous has God in all his thoughts. We want God to go with us throughout the day and be a factor in the decisions we make and the activities we do and the words we say. So have an awareness of God, number one, throughout the day. Number two, personal holiness. Personal holiness. Sin not. How can I develop a spiritual life? I've got to conquer the temptations of the flesh that war against a spiritual life. That's 1 Peter 2:11. Number three, how can I develop a spiritual life? Active meditation. Meditate on God. Meditate on spiritual things. That's commune with your own heart upon your bed. Especially the first half of that verse, or that phrase, commune with your own heart. And now let me make a second point, a different point from the last part, upon your bed. How can I develop a spiritual life? Capitalize on quietness. Capitalize on quietness. We live in a loud world, a busy world. Some people have noise literally throughout the day because they have the radio playing, if they're in their car or if they're at work, or they have the TV on whenever they're at home. Even if they're not watching it, they just have the TV as background noise. So there's literally noise all day long to distract the mind and to keep one's mind from thinking spiritual thoughts. So, go ahead.
So I use Psalms 37:7. Stillness, rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him.
Yeah, that's a good one. 37:7, you say?
Yeah, 37:7. Fret not thyself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass.
That's good. Does someone else have something?
No.
All right, let's move into the next point, which is slow down. How to develop a spiritual life? Be still. Be still. Just slow down. Just give some time for deeper life than just the busyness of got to be here, got to do this, got to always have a to-do list. Just be still. Go for a walk. Sit down and pray. Sit down and read the Bible. Sit down and think. Be still. And he even instructs them to do that right here at this point. Salah. Be still right now. Meditate on this. Take a pause. Now we have two other points that are in verse 5. So we will look at that and then we'll come back and notice some additional points for our other sermon. Offer the sacrifice of righteousness. So how do I develop a spiritual life? Offer God sacrifices. That which cost us nothing means nothing to us. So we want to show God that we're dedicated to him, we're committed to him, we're invested in him. So make sacrifices, give up sin, add to our lives a spiritual aspect. Somebody says, well, I'm so busy, I just can't give up my Sundays for worship. I don't want to give up a whole day of my week for a friend. If you're too busy for God, you're too busy. How's God going to bless you if you don't have time for him? Don't you want God's blessings? Rearrange your priorities and you will be amazed at how much more you may be able to get done, or how much you will no longer feel the necessity to do some things that were there, because God takes the place of less important things, less meaningful things. So offer God sacrifices. And then what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 6, practice trust. How do I develop a spiritual life? Practice trust. I can't trust in myself, my wisdom, my friends, my money, my good looks. I'm going to trust in God, and God will reward that trust in him. So there are 6 points on how to develop a spiritual life from just 2 verses. Of course, there are a number of verses that are listed there that you can add, and you can add others to that also. But let me go back now, if you've had time to be able to write all that. Maybe I'll leave it on the screen there. But I'm going to go back to the sermon on lessons from Psalm 4. And we have 4 more here. So standing in awe of God prevents sin. Standing in awe of God prevents sin. So I'm tempted to do evil. I want to do it because it would be fun, or it's because it's my habit, or whatever reason. But what's going to keep me from doing it? Realizing that there's an awesome God watching me and that will reward me or that will punish me. So standing in awe of God helps me not sin. Stand in awe and sin not. Those thoughts go together in the first part of verse 4. Now, the middle part of verse 4 teaches us this lesson: meditate upon God or about God while in bed. You could even reword that. Meditate upon God upon your bed. Meditate upon God upon your bed. So what do you think about before you go to sleep at night? Most people have a period of time that they are awake before they're asleep. So what do I think about? Do I think about God? And then what about in the morning when I wake up? Some people, I guess, hop straight out of bed as soon as they wake up, but most people, it's more like a dawn than a light switch. They're coming awake, and they may turn over a few times, and they may hit the snooze button. So what do I do in those first moments of the day? Well, why not meditate upon God? Have a prayer. Then the next one, I don't even know what number this is, but this one, practice self-examination. Which one number is it? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is lesson 9 in the Psalm. Practice self-examination. So be still upon your bed, commune with your own hearts. Well, that would be self-examination, communing with your heart. And that would be a good way to end today. Have I sinned today? Are there secret sins? Psalm 19, 13, and 14. Are there presumptuous sins that I need to take care of? Then number 10 is also in verse 5, offer the sacrifices of righteousness. So offer God the sacrifice of a righteous life. It's not easy to live a righteous life. It's a whole lot easier to live a sinful life, to go the way of the world. Nobody will be real upset with me if I'm just like everybody else. But if I'm different, if I stand out, if I contradict them, then that's not going to be as well received, and that's going to be harder to do. But offer to God a righteous life. Offer to God the sacrifice of a righteous life. All right, once you have those, I'm going to go to the side and have a couple of sermons based on meditation. I think I gave you some material meditation. Well, no, I haven't given you Psalm 1 yet. But Friday, we will cover Psalm 1 in our first class at PTP. And we may talk about, in fact, I'm going to skip over there real quick and see how much of this material we'll cover.
Did we miss the last 2 points of that?
Looks like we're not going to cover it in Psalm 1, so that's good. The last 2 points of which one?
The one you were in the middle of there, the last point, after offer God a sacrifice of a righteous life. I see 2 more points.
Yeah, we got more that are coming, but
Okay.
I'm just doing
Okay, just go verse by verse, I got you.
Yeah, as we come to it, I give it to you. All right. While we're still on the verse about communing here, meditation, let me give you a couple of sermons on meditation. So here's one, another how-to sermon, how to meditate. And the word meditate that's translated commune here means to discuss with yourself, to discuss with yourself. So how do I meditate? Number one, be still. That's talked about in this song. You're not going to meditate on the run. You're going to meditate when you're quiet. You're not going to meditate in a lot of noise and distraction. You're going to meditate when it's quiet, when you're alone. Number two, be serious. Meditation is not a frivolous activity, it's a serious activity. So I need a serious mindset. And then number three, be silent. And silence would include not making excuses for my sin. So I want to zip my mouth when I want to say, God, I've sinned, but it was really hard temptation, or I had these extenuating circumstances, or she really tempted me and just kept on, and I finally gave in. It really is more her fault than my fault. That David could have said, well, Bathsheba, but you know, when you read, or when we get to Psalm 51, which we will do in our class, one of our classes, hopefully on Friday, David doesn't make any excuses like that. He's silent about excuses. He just asks God to forgive him. He confesses the sin. All right.
Your iPad left the
Yeah.
class.
Let me go back and start that over.
It was done studying Psalms, I guess.
Okay.
It
I guess
was meditating, Sam.
It was meditating, yeah.
I need
That,
quiet.
yeah. The last part of meditation, don't sleep.
All right, the next sermon is called Upon What to Meditate. So this could easily be subpoints, obviously, for maybe the serious part here. These could be your subpoints that would be your ABC there. But I put down C, also Psalm 119 and Psalm 1 notes, but I just discovered that I don't have any Psalm 1 notes on meditation. So we will, though, when we get to Psalm 119, we will have some more. And we may have some in other places. We can come back and add that. All right, so meditate upon safety. God is our shield. A lot of verses about God as our shield listed there. Philippians 4:7 in the New Testament. Then number two, meditate upon honor, God's honor, honorable things. I think it just kicked me off again, didn't it?
I like the bear in the background.
You like that, huh? I gave you a different view today.
Yeah.
This is the last day I'm checking. I actually had to get a late checkout to stay in here to teach my class. So we're moving over to the Wilderness Hotel tonight. We'll be over there for PTP. It's a little closer. This takes about 10 minutes to get over there. But I love staying at these cabins. They're really peaceful and beautiful. All right, honor, and you can put Psalm 91:15. Number three, meditate upon joy and deliverance. Joy and deliverance. And I guess we could add Philippians 4:8 on, I think it talks about whatsoever things are honorable there, so that would certainly fit from the New Testament. All right, anybody need any more time on those first two? I haven't given you the third box yet, but I'm going to read the next verse before I give you that. Everybody good?
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
That's a good picture.
All right, let's move over then to verse 6. There be many that say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. So a couple more lessons in our lessons from Psalm 4. Just a couple more points. This is number 11, 12. So I guess we got another baker's dozen here. Michael, you remember
13.
what a dozen is now, right?
13. Yeah. Well,
You're a baker. You ought to know that before me. I don't know how you missed that all those
yeah,
years.
because I don't count 13. That's an odd number. I like even number. It'd be like 14 to me.
All right, let's do the next one, which is God looks at, pays attention to, and smiles upon his children. You might just want to pick whichever verb you like the best if you're preaching that. It probably is too hard to remember 3 verbs, but God looks at, pays attention to, smiles upon his children. Maybe I would do pays attention to with this point, because we got another point that is on smiling. So I'm going to take that out, make it simpler here.
I'm sitting there thinking of that's just a 3-part sermon right there.
Well, you
How
actually
he
did that
looks,
too,
he's
yeah.
not like Elijah with the servants of Baal. Your God's far away or asleep. No, God is looking at him, pays attention, and he smiles.
That's good. Yeah. I like how you're thinking. You guys are learning. You already knew a lot of this, but maybe you're sharpening your sermons, your homiletical skills a little bit by this approach to Psalms. I like to hear.
You're hitting all chords, brother. Don't worry. Don't worry. You're hitting all chords.
You know, I'm not going to be around forever, so you're going to have to write your own sermons one of these days. So,
yeah. Well, after we catch
I
up,
already know how to do that. Yeah.
Look, after we catch up all the ones you write, we'll be all right. You got to preach them.
I was gonna say, we won't have to do that for a while. I got about 5 years worth from your classes so far, so.
Yeah, we haven't even had all my classes yet, so we get you a good decade. Yeah, a good decade.
I don't reckon I got much more than about a decade and a half in me anyway.
We'll see about that. The Lord he may extend you on out past triple digits. We'll see.
That'd be fine about me.
Well, your dad's still living, man. That tells me you got some pretty good genes.
Yeah, dad's 80 and still goes out and plays golf as good as any 20-year-old, so.
Yeah, so you're gonna be around a while. You better learn how to write your own sermons, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, our next one is the Lord smiles upon his people and puts gladness in their heart. The Lord smiles upon his people and puts gladness in their heart. And I put Numbers 6, 24 and 25, which is a pretty famous verse, and then some passages from Philippians in the New Testament based on that gladness and joy. And then I made a point. This is really an application of that. Happy marriages and strong churches are not built upon pessimism. Happy marriages and strong churches are not built upon pessimism. Now, I'm not an advocate for positive only preaching. I don't think you're scriptural if you only preach positive sermons. You're not preaching the whole counsel of God. And God's prophets and preachers have always dealt with reality, and that includes sin and things that we need to correct. But I will say that in a local work, you cannot build a good congregation if all you ever talk about are the problems in the brotherhood, the false teachings that are going on. Do we need to cover those? Yes, we need to. We need to fortify our people. We need to deal with whatever comes up that is a threat to their faith and to their hope of salvation. But I'm not going to get up there every Sunday and talk about, well, this is what some brother over in Texas is saying now. Well, you're a long way from Texas, or this is what some guy up in over in California is teaching. Well, I know we live in the time of the internet and things spread, but we have to be balanced and we have to give people some hope, give them some joy. And you could build a strong church on optimism, faith, but not on pessimism. Now let's do this sermon called "The Lord Lifts," and it's based on "Lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us." What that means is God smile at us. That's the light of the countenance. Now, the Lord lifts the head of the supplicant. We saw that in Psalm 3. He lifts the light of his countenance. In other words, he smiles on his people. He lifts the life of the humble. That's Psalm 113:7. And he lifts the condition of the meek, or the situation of the meek. Psalm 147:6. So the Lord lifts. Let the Lord do the heavy lifting. I think I'm going to write that in. That would be something I would use in the introduction. All right, we're almost finished with this psalm. We're making good time here. We'll have time to cover, I think the syllabus says we're supposed to cover 4 and 5 today, so I would like to do that. Stay on target. Verse 7, thou hast put gladness in my heart more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. So harvest time is a joyful time, especially when you have a bountiful harvest. People are joyous because we're going to eat well this winter. We've got, we're going to have some extra money because we're going to be able to sell some of our produce that sometimes we don't have any left over to sell from what we have to use. So that's a very joyous picture to an agricultural community when the harvest has come and there's corn, wine has increased. Now, here's our spiritual lesson. Spiritual joy exceeds physical joy. So this is physical joy. Fleshly needs are met. But gladness in my heart is a spiritual joy. And you can have spiritual joy without physical joy. What about Paul in the jail cell? He had joy, but he didn't have any physical benefits to speak of. And we also might make the point that this one is empty if you don't have this one. There are a lot of rich people that are miserable people because they don't understand that their soul is starving, that there's a more important aspect of life. So spiritual joy exceeds physical joy. And then this is just a sermon topic. It really goes with what we already gave you, but I have it written here too. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. So that's the verse for how to get a good night's sleep. And I wrote a tract on that. I think it's still in print. You might make a note if you wanted to preach that. You might want to get that and adapt it or use it as a resource for your sermon. But I'm pretty sure that the main points are probably over here, wherever. Oh, the previous psalm. Yeah, the main points are probably similar to that right there. But there would be some additional information that is not there. All right, let's see if there's anything else for Psalm 4. I think that we have one more screen here, but I've already covered that. So we're going into Psalm 5, unless you need anything repeated in Psalm 4.
I was gonna say, with that part of physical needs and spiritual needs, could we tie in John 6, where Jesus says, do not work for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, Isaiah 55 goes there. So
Okay.
Isaiah 55 and John 6, I think I'll write that in. That point.
That is John 6:26.
John 6.
And also what John 4, 30, 34, Jesus says, this meat that I eat, I want to eat the meat of my Father. I want to finish his will. I forget.
Old age will do that to you.
See, what y'all are doing is what I do to you. You're going too fast for me to write this stuff down. So I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat in a minute.
John 4, when he talk about the meat, remember the disciples went to go get Jesus' meat. He says, the meat that I eat is of my Father. My Father's meat.
So is that John
Sam,
4,
you start-
4 what?
Are you talking about John 4, where he says, I have food which you don't know about?
Yeah, hold on. I'm
What was
talking about the
What was the
disciples.
passage? Samuel, what was the John 6 passage?
John 6:26.
All
It's
right.
when the people are wanting more food from
Yeah,
him.
that makes sense.
And then Jesus goes on to say, take a bite of my flesh, and then everybody gets mad.
Like, hard saying. We're going.
John 4, 30, 30, 34. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work.
Very good. Say iron sharpens iron. So that's what we're seeing here. Well, I'm sharpening you and you're sharpening me. I like that teamwork. All right, let's move into Psalm 5 next. And I'll give you the keys to the chapter. Let's call this psalm, I actually have two titles for this psalm, but let's call it number 1, The Smiling God. The Smiling God. Key verse 5:11. The key thought, let God hear your voice in the morning. Let God hear your voice in the morning. Based on verse 3, 5:3. And then we have a couple of outlines. I think the first one is my outline, and the second one is one that I read somewhere. So 1 through 3 is the Lord's ear. 4 through 6, the Lord's holiness. Verse 7, the Lord's temple. Verses 8 through 12, the Lord's shield. The Lord's shield. 1 through 3, the Lord's ear. 4 through 6, the Lord's holiness. 7, the Lord's temple. 8 through 12, the Lord's shield. And then another outline, just 2 points, 2 sections to the psalm. In fact, I think I'll say it that way, sections. One through 7, the inner side of a devout life. The inner side of a devout life. And then 8 through 12, the outward side of a devout life. And that's the right order for that too. You have to have the inner side before you can have the outer side. It's inside out, not outside in.
That right there applies. That's something that people don't realize is we talked about this at Claxton. Yes, we need to get out and evangelize in the community, but we need to look at the 30 people that have attended this congregation over the last 10 years that we don't see anymore.
Yeah, that's
First, before, and we need to make sure that we're spiritual. So when people come in, they see what a spiritual life is supposed to look like.
That's right. That's exactly.
Well, Mark 7:21, for within, out of the heart of men proceeds the evil thoughts.
That's right.
You,
Good passage.
you all right. You all right, Sam? You all right?
It's called
Early-
it's called logos.
Yeah, hey, it's all right. You know, at least you're not trying to keep it to yourself, brother.
All right, let's look at a couple of other background things, and then we'll get into the text. But a second idea for a title for the psalm is "Meet Me in the Morning." Meet me in the morning, because he says, you'll hear my voice in the morning. So meet me in the morning. Then the word nihiloth means wind instruments. That's also in your list at the beginning of the book, the introduction. But I'm writing those in here just so I don't have to go look them up every time. So nihiloth means wind instruments. Now, the first verse, let's read together. Give ear to my words,
Oh,
O Lord. Consider
my meditation.
I think I'm going to copy this and move it so it's all together.
Let's see.
The New American Standard says, "Consider my groaning."
Yeah.
Yeah, the ESV says the same thing.
I guess it's the same thing as awe in the previous psalm. Word could be translated either way, and translators felt like that fit the context better, perhaps. And
Yeah.
again, I think you could make either point that both of those are scriptural ideas. So
Sure. If you look at the following verse, give attention to the sound of my cry. So
yep, makes sense.
he's talking with himself, and
Well, Brother Webster,
Yes,
you
sir.
said Niha means wind instruments?
nihilith.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, yeah, because the ESV says flutes. Okay.
That's
Yes.
a wind instrument.
I was just saying that. I said flutes. I'm just concurring. That's all.
That is definitely a wind instrument.
I didn't say it was a string instrument. Good.
It could be a
That's when it
saxophone.
says steel guitar.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
That's
you
all right.
guys are just brothers. You act like brothers.
That is a wind instrument, Michael.
That's not
Oh
a bad
my
thing.
goodness. That's all right.
I was consolidating here a little bit so I can give you this sermon. So this is the sermon lessons from Psalm 5. Lessons from Psalm 5. And there are several in the first verse, and some of them are on one screen and the other screens. So I'll combine them here. All right, so let's do number one. Our prayers should be expressed. That's the word words. Should be thought out. That's the word meditation. And should be emotional, or can be emotional. That's the word cry, which I guess is in verse 2. But you could, if you're using a translation that has a different word for meditation, I guess that would probably fit with the emotion aspect of it. And there are two other lessons to be observed in verse 1. Prayer and meditation go together. Prayer and meditation go together. Because he says, give ear to my words. That's a prayer. Consider my meditation. And then the third lesson in verse 1 is thought should precede prayer. You know, sometimes people will have a whole prayer and not have any new thoughts. They just say what they've always said. Maybe they don't even focus on what they're saying. It's just vain repetition. So thought should precede prayer, and it should be involved in prayer. And I guess it should be after prayer too. So you could do a before, during, and after aspect of that. So after I get up from my prayers, I need to go watch for the blessings. And I also need to go do what I can to answer those prayers. Like if I pray for a lost person to be saved, then I go out. I don't expect God to save that person without somebody being a teacher. So I go out and look for an opportunity to be a teacher. So there is a thought process before my prayers, during my prayers, and following my prayers. Now we move into verse 2. Hearken unto the cry of the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for unto thee will I pray. The next lesson is personal righteousness must precede public devotion. We said that in the outline or the beginning of the chapter, but that's where it fits, verse 3 and verse 7. I didn't have room to put it at verse 3, so I put it there, but it fits the context here.
Where is that?
Personal righteousness must precede public devotional. So you see my voice, I, and then down in verse 7, I will come to the house of the multitude. So that's public. So private here, public here. And private comes before public. Right.
Can't see it. Where is it?
This is where I wrote it right here. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Okay, personal righteousness must precede public devotion.
Yeah. Looks like I got a straight line there too. You got some verses there if you want to jot those down that are your support or other scriptures on that subject. What I'm doing also, and I don't think I made a sermon of this yet, but notice that I've got a 1, 2, 3 here. So who is God? God is my King. Who is God? God is my God, the one I worship. Who is God? He's the Lord. He's the authority or my ruler. So King, God, ruler, 3 descriptions or titles of God in that those 2 verses. Now, let's see. Let me give you these 2 points or these 3 points next. My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer to thee, and we'll look up. So the next lesson in our lessons from the Psalm, we must meet God in the morning if we are to have a good day. We must meet God in the morning if we are to have a good day. So if we go out without asking God's blessings, are we going to have as good a day as if we ask for God's blessing? Surely not. So am I going to be protected from temptation if I don't say to God, lead me not into temptation, deliver me from evil? No, if I'm going to have a good day, I need to meet with God in the morning. The next lesson is when life gets you down, look up. When life gets you down, look up. He says, I will look up. So when life gets you down, look up. Abraham Lincoln said, of course, Abraham Lincoln said a lot of things he never said, but it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln that he said, I've often been driven to my knees by the sincere conviction that there was nowhere else to go. Well, that sounds like Lincoln might have said, but somebody said it. And it's a good thought, whoever said it.
I heard there was an actor, and he's one of the more conscientious ones, but he was talking to a group of college kids at their commencement. And he said, when you go to bed at night, put your slippers, push them back into the bed a little bit. So when you get up in the morning, you've got to get down on your knees to get them. And while you're down there, right.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. Or you could put your car keys under your bed. You'd have to kneel before you left, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because I don't wear slippers, but I always look for my keys. So that would work. Or your wallet, There's a couple of notes in verse 3 that I'll give you also that are just textual. So the word direct in verse 3 means to order as a sacrifice on the altar. And we're going to make a point about that. I will direct my prayer. It's the same word, or the background of it is a priest killing the animal and spreading the parts out on the altar that will be burned up. So it's setting everything in order, getting ready for the sacrifice. Now, remember that the burnt sacrifice was total dedication. Everything's gone. Other sacrifices, you got to keep part of it, like the shoulder or whatever to eat, but not the burnt sacrifice. So here is the point that builds on it. The first thing the high priest did each morning was lay the burnt offering on the altar. The first thing the high priest did each morning was to lay the burnt offering on the altar. And there are your verses for that. Exodus 29, 39, 41, Exodus 30, verse 7, Leviticus 6, 12. Now I'm going to go back and draw your attention to these New Testament verses, because 1 Peter 2, 5 and 9 talks about a royal, that description. And
Royal priesthood.
One of them is a priesthood, isn't it? So we're priests today. So we don't offer an animal. We don't set an animal in order on an altar. We set our prayer on the altar. We order our prayer and give it to God in the morning. And also Revelation 1, 5, and 6. All right. Let's see.
I like the fact that you got total dedication. And sometimes we don't use that in Romans 12, 1 and 2 like we should.
That's right.
Present your body as a living sacrifice, holy. And so we just we quote it, but we don't explain that it's total dedication to God.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of a burnt offering.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I'm lining up something. I'm lining up something out of Psalms.
I see it cooking. The smoke's coming out of your ears a little bit there.
Yeah, it usually does.
All right, here's a sermon on mornings. You ever preached on the morning? Well, morning is a time for prayer. That's here. Morning is a time for renewal. They are new every morning. Lamentations 3:23. Morning is a time for work. Joshua was famous for getting up early to work. Morning is a time to think on God's love. Psalm 143:8, Psalm 90:14. Morning is a time for joy. Joy cometh in the morning. Psalm 30, verse 5. And
Yes,
then
sir.
morning is a time to sing. Psalm 59:16. So that's a good sermon on mornings. I would probably preach that for the morning sermon if I were going to preach it, and not the evening sermon, right? You could do another one on evenings. All right, here's another sermon called Look Up. Look up. That's on verse 3. I will look up. So I will look up in prayer. I will look up upon the fields, John 4:35, that are white in the harvest. And I will look up for help under the hills, from whence cometh my help. Psalm 121:1. So look up in prayer, look upon the fields in evangelism, look up to God for help when you need it. Look up. All right, let's do verse 4. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. So here's our next point in our lessons from Psalm 5. God gets no kick out of sin. Neither should we. Some people glory, we said earlier, in their shame. They get a kick out of sin. They look forward to sin. But God does not. God doesn't enjoy it. And Romans 1:32 says that some even enjoy watching other people sin or knowing about other people's sins. Romans 1:32. God does not get a kick out of sin, neither should we. And you got a number of verses there. No darkness, no evil, no sin will be in heaven. So we should avoid things that will keep us out of heaven. Now, let me give you a different sermon called The God of No. The God of No. If I were preaching this, I probably would do a contrast at the beginning, because some people see God as a God of no. That is, that's all he is. You can't do this, you can't do that, no fun God. But I would make the point that God is the God of yes, and go through some quick points about that. But then I'd say, but God is also the God of no. There are things that God won't do, and they're wise for us to imitate. So he is the God of no appreciation. First, he hath no pleasure in wickedness, no appreciation for wickedness. He is the God of no tolerance. Neither shall evil dwell with thee. No appreciation for it, no tolerance of it. Now, the third one is no fellowship. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. There's no fellowship of God with the wicked or the foolish. And then number 4, no love. The God of love has no love for the workers of iniquity. So you have, it doesn't mean he won't save them. It doesn't mean that he does not love their souls, but he does not love their iniquities. So the God of no appreciation, no tolerance, no fellowship, no love.
He can still be the God of no on the good things. If you look at, like Revelation points out, no tears, no more death, no more heartache.
Yeah, that'd be a good way to introduce that sermon too. Or even to add another point to it, although that would probably just use that in your introduction or your conclusion, to segue into your invitation. This is what God's offering. He's the God of no, and that's a good thing. And he wants to give you this place where there are no, all those things. That brings us then down to verse 6. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing or lies. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. So notice that he's against the violent and he's against liars. So that's the beginning of a sermon on, I guess you could do foolish, liars, and bloody or violent. So you got 3 sinners that are identified as being on God's bad list. Bad list. Sinners on God's bad list. I think I'll put that in. So let's use, have we used blue in this chapter? No, let's use blue. All right, we're about out of time, so I guess I'm going to start here next Tuesday. But before we leave, we got 3 minutes. So let me give you another outline of the chapter. Verses 1 through 6.
Next Tuesday.
Yes.
Won't we still be in?
Oh, yeah. You're right. Tuesday after next. Tuesday, 10 days from now, we'll have this class. You're right. All right. Hear me is 1 through 6. Lead me is 7 and 8. Protect me, 9 and 10. And bless me, 11 and 12. So hear me, 1 through 6. Lead me, 7 and 8. Protect me, 9 and 10. Bless me, 11 and 12. All right, anybody been dying to say something and you didn't get to say it? Here's your chance.
I had, go ahead,
Go ahead,
Mike.
Sam. No, go ahead, Sam.
You had mentioned the 3 that you had put on there, Mr. Allen, the my King, my God,
Yeah.
my Lord. I thought of a sermon I wanted to bring to you if you got a second.
Absolutely.
I put, just for start off, who do I start the day for? Me, myself, and I. And I
Mhm.
put me as in ruler, my self-satisfaction, and then idols I put in my life.
Wow.
Or do I start it for my king, he rules, my God satisfaction, and my only Lord?
That's good.
That's all I
Brother
could
Web-
think of is like with me, myself, and I is like, well, my king, my God, my Lord.
I like
Oh,
it.
that's a lot, Sam. Sound like you back in the Ezekiel class. Got idols built up in your heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh, so I'm going to give this sermon the title, Who Waits for Me in the Morning? Who's waiting for me to check in with him? My King, my God, and my Lord.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then I can make the application like you just did. He's my, he's
Wait.
waiting with my orders for the day. My King, he's waiting for, he is providing. He's my provider. So provision. And God, you think you use the word satisfaction. I like that.
Yeah, because myself, I was pretty happy. I was trying to find out something for me to go with, but instead of, for myself with that term, me, myself, and I put my self satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah, a
pretty
lot of
happy with it.
people, they get up in the morning thinking only of me, myself, and I, and that's all they think about all day,
That's right.
It's a
That's right.
sad way to live, though. It's not, it doesn't bring joy, and not long-term joy. All right, well, I wanted to get the rest of the chapter in, but we made a good start on it. So I guess we started about the same place we were. We got 2 whole Psalms done, but not, we finished Psalm 3, finished Psalm 4, got half of Psalm 5. So I guess that's about 2 Psalms. But we'll jump in there. Looks like, see, I got these ready for you. And if I don't have enough time to do any more, we'll go faster, because whenever I have more time, we get more sermons. So it slows us down a little. But that's a good thing. We got a lot of,
Mr. Allen, you're teaching Psalms on Friday, right?
I am
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where we'll
Psalms,
be Friday.
yeah, Psalms is all day Friday, right?
all day Friday. So here are the PTP Psalms. I'm a little bit ambitious. We probably won't be able to do all that, but I've got the notes ready for those. Psalm 1, 19, 23, and all those. So we'll see how far we can get. We've got 7 sessions. And I got 9 Psalms. So, but these in the middle, I don't have a lot of material on those. So we may be able to cover those two sessions, but the rest of them
So-
have a lot of material.
So, Brother Webster, you've already put in Psalms 19, the material on that. But there's
Yeah.
no material on Psalms 23, 32, 51, 40, or 46 yet.
Yeah. Let me go back and see if I'll try to get those ready and put them in.
Yep.
For
Yeah,
Friday.
because I was looking at the LMS which you loaded, because the first set stopped at 22, and then you picked up and put in 3, 4, 5, and the others today.
Yeah, that's what I did. I got to looking, and I went back to see what I'd sent. And then I said, oh, wait a minute, I've got material in some of these Psalms. But so anyway, I went back and edited those last night and got those in there. So, but these, I believe, are probably already edited, all the ones I'm doing at PTP. So it shouldn't take long to get those up and in the LMS. But I'll have material between 10 and 19 also for you. I may not be able to do every Psalm. I may not have material in every Psalm, but I'll have it on a lot of them. I mean, I'll have a lecture on all the Psalms up through 37, and then we'll skip around after that. But I don't know if I have written material for all of them. We'll see.